Hey, what's going on, everyone? I got a special guest here today. We have Trevor McGregor, an international mindset and performance coach with 25 plus years in corporate leadership, 45,000 coaching sessions, and his current client load manages $25 billion in assets. After 5 years of studying under Tony Robbins, Trevor now lives an endless summer lifestyle across the world, proving that freedom, wealth, and family can coexist. This conversation is going to break down the five freedoms, identity and breath work, and how to design an optimal life with zero artificial limits. Trevor, I'm so excited to have you here, and let's hop into it right away. You've helped thousands of high performers create more money and more freedom, but in your experience, what's the real reason people stay stuck in lives that they've already outgrown?
Well, thank you so much, Jordan, and great to be on your show. And boy, have you opened up a can of worms in my world because, I've been doing this work for a long time and, someone who's into personal growth, such as yourself. And, I applaud you for this podcast and for helping the listener really see the world differently because that's ultimately my role as a high performance coach. When people come to me, they have certain beliefs, they have values, and they have rules that pretty much dictate how they're going to show up in their career, their finances, their health, their relationships, their spirituality, all of these different categories. And ultimately, we've got to stop and ask one question. Where did those beliefs, those values, and those rules come from? And for most of the people, it came from their parents. And where did their parents get it? They got it from their grandparents. So
Yes.
ultimately, it's like people come to me using an operating system from 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I say, all right, well, that's okay. But can we ask one question? And that question is, can we get curious to see which of those beliefs, which of those values, and which of those rules are going to help you to get where you want to go today? Right. And that's where the whole conversation starts. Because to answer your question in a nutshell, it's really shifting from an old model of the world from the
Yes.
past into a new model of the world in the present to create what I love to call the predictable future moving forward. So there you
I
go.
love that. I love that. And when you start to think about it, you start to realize that a lot of us have these constraints. Like if you're hearing these words and Trevor saying stuff like beliefs, values, and you're like, I don't have any, I never chose them. You have values and you have belief systems. You just haven't specifically chosen them, which is where Trevor starts to help people with that. Helps to identify and bring this to the light because that's something that we all struggle with. So Trevor, for you in your journey, where did this kind of come to light? Where did this all begin?
All right. Well, here we go. Because again, I've achieved some phenomenal success in my life, but boy, have I failed as well. And if we go back, I was born and raised in Canada, grew up middle class, went off to, university and studied business or college and studied business. And then I went to work for a hospitality company. So they did hospitality and some retail. And I rose through the ranks and became the executive director of operations. And there was a time in my late 20s, almost my 30th birthday, where the owners of that company came to me and said, Trevor, you're a really good employee. We've got these expansion plans and these growth plans. Would you consider becoming an investor as we get ready to expand across Canada? And I thought, wow, this is really cool, giving an opportunity to expand in this company. And so what did I do? I said yes. And this is where the story gets interesting because I took all of my savings, I cashed in my 401k, and I even convinced my own parents who loved me and wanted the best for me to take out a six-figure second mortgage on the family home. And they loved me and they believed in me. And I pushed all this money into this expansion plan. And for the first little while, it went well until around 2001, right around the time the planes hit the towers. We were expanding too fast. And I'll never forget the day when my partner came into the office and he said, Trevor, we're hemorrhaging cash. We're burning cash faster than we can hang on. And to make a long story short, we imploded. We had to shut a
Oh,
whole bunch of stores. And I lost all of that money that I put into this expansion plan, all of it gone, right? And it caused a huge amount of stress for me, caused a huge rift in my marriage, and I gained a bunch of weight. And so I'll park it there because this is where the story really gets interesting. But can you imagine going through all of that, being married and with a young family in your early 30s?
it sounds terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. To give you perspective, I got married in November of 24. and we're like kind of considering, we're like seeing where we're at on that, like on
Yeah,
yeah, no. So it's I'm right where you were at, and it's like that sounds like the word like
it
terrible.
was awful. And that's where, when you're down and out, what do you do? And thank God somebody said, Trevor, what you need is a coach or a mentor. And I said, what's a coach? What's a mentor? And he said, it's somebody that can help you get up, dust yourself off, and figure out how to move forward. And so didn't know even what coaching was or how much it was or any of that, but I really, really, really believed that that was the only path forward. And thank God for me, I found a coach and a mentor who took me under his wing. And he did just that. He said, Trevor, what's happened to you is unfortunate, but you're still a young man. You've got a beautiful family. You've got to find a way to get up, pay back those loans and, start living your best life. And I said,
Yeah,
yeah, but how am I going to pay back all of these loans? And he said, well, there's one thing that I may suggest, and that would be investing in real estate. And I said, real estate?
interesting.
I don't know anything about real estate. He says, well, you can literally use other people's money, buy these little properties, fix them up, and either, rent them, refi them, or sell them and take the money from that and do another one and take the money from that and do another one. And Jordan, my back was up against the wall and I really didn't have any other, way to do it. And so I followed his lead because he was a
Yeah,
very successful coach and a real estate investor. And I took, some other money from family and friends, bought a little property, fixed it up, got massive appreciation, took that money, bought my first duplex, fixed it up. Then I started to buy fourplexes, more single family homes. And in just 2.5 years, not only did I make enough money to pay back all of those failed loans, including my parents,
oh
I had
wow,
a beautiful cash flowing portfolio on the top of that. And
wow,
that's when people started to come to me and say, Trevor, how are you doing this? How are you buying all these properties? And it was my son's soccer coach that came to me and said, look, my wife and I want to follow what you're doing. Can you sit down and show us how to do it? And I
yeah,
said, buy me a drink. I'll pull out my blueprint. And that's what we did. And it's literally within 6 weeks of showing them my path, they went out and bought their first rental property.
oh
Six
wow,
months later, they bought their second. And within a year, they had 3 cash flowing rental properties. And they would send other people to me. And I'm telling you, I just became known as the guy to go to when you wanted to get into real estate. And that's when the coaching bug bit. So I'll
yeah,
park it there for your reflection. But to go from losing everything to radically paying it all back, thank God, for me finding this coach and then starting to, kind of, coach other people through it. That's really where I started to feel whole again.
yeah. And you found that purpose. Because the
That's right.
scariest part is when you're sitting there down and out and you don't think anything's possible. So like for any of the listeners right now, I want Trevor's story to be not a good luck for Trevor, like lucky for him. I want it to be a this is a token of possibility. This is possible for anyone listening right now. And if you are listening right now, it's even more of a possibility because we're going to hear how it happens and how we can rewire our own brains. So it's important for us to realize that.
That's
Absolutely.
exactly it. And what I love about that, it's really an opportunity to, get quiet and say to yourself, even though I'm not happy with what happened, that God doesn't waste the pain. That we go through these ups and we go through these downs, and it almost feels like a roller coaster where you're going to fall out the other side. But I'm telling you, there was an absolute path for me that set me up for even a greater trajectory because of my failure, right? But looking back
Yeah.
at it now, Jordan, I believe in that quote from Think and Grow Rich, where Napoleon Hill says, there is no failure, there's only feedback, right? There is no
Yes.
failure, there's only feedback. So if you're alive and your heart is beating and you have a pulse, you're going to get a lot of feedback. Sometimes it'll be good and sometimes it'll be not good. And that's just the way it works. But that's when I really felt that, man, I want to help more people. And so
Yeah.
I started to really get into personal growth. I started to read all the books, listen to CDs because there were no podcasts back in the day. And I started to go to events. And one of those
Yeah.
events that really lit my fire was Tony Robbins, Unleash the
Of course.
Power. And so I went to the event and, all these people in the stadium were all walking on fire. And ultimately, at the end of that, I thought, wow, this is incredible. And I hired my own Tony Robbins coach at that time, because again, I wanted to
Of
get into the
course.
Tony ecosystem. And I worked with him. His name was Dave. He was just a wonderful man. And one day on one of the calls, he stopped and he said to me, Trevor, you're so passionate about this work. You're so passionate about real estate. You're so passionate about business. You love people. I don't know if you know this, but Tony is looking for part-time coaches to join the team to expand the global body of coaching. And
Oh,
I
wow.
laughed and I said, yeah, but I don't have any formal coaching experience. He says, you know what? You need passion and you need to have at least enough business knowledge and wisdom to, come in and do
Yeah.
that. So I laughed again. And then I thought about it. And I said, all right, I'll throw in my resume. And so I literally put together my resume. And at the time, Jordan, they were taking 20 resumes, or 20 spots were available, but they got 500 resumes. 500 resumes for 20 spots. And I thought, geez, there's no way in heck I'm going to get there. But I got shortlisted from 500 down to 250,
Oh,
250
nice.
to 100, 100 down to 50. And it's at that time that you go and you do your practicum. And I remember flying to Orlando, Florida, and literally going to the Tony Robbins events, meeting the senior team, going through all of the grueling training. And when the dust settled, not only did I get offered a part-time job, they loved my passion and offered me a full-time job. And that's when I went to work with and for the man, the myth, the legend, Tony Robbins. And that was an absolute dream of a lifetime.
I and I want everyone to realize this, that what Trevor's saying is that he put himself out there. He had no idea. He didn't have
That's
to do any of this. He wanted to try. Someone put a spec in the world that says, "Hey, this is possible," and he goes, "I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna give it a whirl." And think about how many of these moments come up in our lives, and we just let them pass because we're not seeing them.
it. That's
It's
right.
and I'm trying to raise our awareness so we can start to see these moments that come up that can be a real game changer for us. Not a, oh my God, you got to go do that trip, or oh my God, another job. Oh, no, we're looking for our passions here, people. It takes a lot of effort.
Well,
A
that's
little
just
bit of
it. It
faith.
does take effort, it takes passion, but it also, comes back to what is your why? Why do you
Yes.
want to move forward? Why do you want to help people? Because when the why is big enough, the universe delivers the how. And the how for
Yes.
me was going to work for Tony. I got to, go and work with and for him for over half a decade. And I became one of his top master platinum coaches as I started to coach more, business owners, franchise owners, doctors, attorneys,
What was that like?
entrepreneurs, startups. It was incredible because I literally got what I call my black belt in coaching because
Yes.
I became very popular. And as I started to do more business and real estate coaching, people started to ask for me by name. And at one point, I had a
Wow.
bigger client load than any other coach on the planet. So a bigger client load than any other coach on the planet. And it was amazing because I loved helping people. And at the same time, I started to get into more apartment rentals in the US, and
Yeah.
we started to do more apartment syndication, where I kind of graduated from all of the, smaller stuff to now where we did, 250 unit apartments in Texas or Florida or the Carolinas. And my partners and I went and did that. So between the coaching and the real estate, I was a very busy guy. And it got to that point where I had to decide, was I going to stay with Tony or was I
Yeah.
going to go out on my own? And so in 2017, I left Tony Robbins after a 5-year amazing career and went and opened Trevor McGregor International. And so fast forward to today, TMI, or Trevor McGregor International, does a lot of coaching. There's a lot
Yeah.
of consulting, there's speaking, there's real estate. We also own a book publishing company.
Oh, wow.
And it really is, our way to get more people into the ecosystem so that they can go from where they are to where they truly want to be. And at this stage, I've done over 45,000 coaching sessions,
Oh my
right?
God.
45,000. So you're hear my voice is raspy. And that's because I spend most days on the phone or Zoom talking, as it's my passion. It's what I love to do. And it's ultimately the biggest reward to see how these clients get to go out there and take their lives to the next level. And that's my story.
Absolutely. I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that. And what was that journey like leaving Tony? Because anytime we have these big moments, we all sit there and we're like, what am I going to do? Like, how do I make
Absolutely.
decisions? And I just want to dive into that one because I know it seems like a big one. And I know the audience is
It's
sitting there
huge.
listening and they're like, I have big decisions. How do you think about it's more about how do you think about big decisions and making them? Like, what do you
Well, it's
pros and cons?
really a,
Yeah.
a, a fabulous question, Jordan. And again, because you don't just leave Tony Robbins. I mean, I had doubt, I had fear, I had worry, I had anxiety. What if it
Of
doesn't work
course.
out? What if I have to go back and be a boomerang coach? That's what we call coaches that come backwards. I didn't want to be one of those. But, as I tried to leave Tony, they didn't let me leave. They offered me another position. They offered me more money and they begged me to stay. And so I thought about it and thought about it. And I went back to, well, what is the number one thing that's most important to me? And that was freedom, right? Working for Tony was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he's going to turn 66 years old this year, and he's been doing his work on this planet a long time. But working underneath him was something that limited my freedom, where me going out on my own and doing Trevor McGregor International and Trevor McGregor coaching allowed me to, literally handle the client load that was best for me, my wife, Lisa, our three boys. And that's what I really, really, made that decision on because where there's doubt, fear, worry, and anxiety, you can bring in something we call the law of polarity to move to courage, possibility, gamification, and a can-do attitude. So I had to leave the saboteur thinking over here and step into what we call the wise sage thinking over here. And that's what helped me make the decision.
I love that. I love that. And what is this freedom that you felt? Because I know you have a freedom framework or five freedoms. Like how did
Yeah.
that come up when you start to think about that? Because it seems
Well,
like
it's again a beautiful way to explain what I really saw as I started to do these tens of thousands of coaching calls, right? And
yeah.
I talked to men, talked to women, talked to professionals, excuse me, I talked to people all over the world. And I really became what I call a pattern recognition specialist. And as a pattern recognition specialist, you start to see what people really want and what allows them to achieve the path towards it or even attainment. And you start to see what causes people to stay stuck, right? So I started to think about what's consistent that high performers want, because at that stage, I considered myself a fairly high performer as a coach, a consultant, a speaker, business owner, publisher, real estate investor. And it really boiled down to five things. And so let me really unveil to you and the listener what I call the five freedoms framework, because here's what I found that everyone wants to move towards. And number one is financial freedom, right? Financial freedom. Most people are afraid to talk about money as if it's a dirty word or if they're, appear to be greedy, but you've got to really think about money and that it's a byproduct of adding value to someone or something. So when we start off with really, what do we want in terms of financial freedom? That's getting crystal clear on how much you want to make a month or a year, or maybe you want to work towards a certain net worth. But that's the elephant in the room for most people, because you can't have the other four freedoms without at least, passing survival and getting into thriving when capital is available to you. Does that resonate with you?
100%. I mean, I see this with all of my coaching clients in regard to whether they're doing well or not. It's just you got to have a plan with money. And a lot of
That's
people
it.
have avoided it. And I think that was one of the biggest travesties because when I started coaching, it was literally just to help people with financial literacy because I have an accounting degree. I graduated. I was taking some of the CPA exams, and I was just like, I can help you guys. Like, I love this stuff. Like, I really enjoy this stuff. And you start to realize, like, financial literacy, if you can make it one of your pillars or a very important thing for you, you can do so well that you might not even have to worry about it. And it's those I think Ray Dalio said it. It's the ones who worry don't have to worry. And it's like,
That's it.
I just love that. So,
Well, it's wonderful that you bring that up because again, before we go to number 2 through 5, there's a lot of literature that if people would just pick it up and read rich books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or Think and Grow Rich, or even today, there's enough money podcasts out there where, I think a lot of people are intimidated because of their beliefs, their values, and their rules about money, where they're still operating from the past instead of the present, where, like you say, you could learn something to start using it to create that predictable future. So
yes.
that's really beautiful because that's really why a lot of people come to coaching. They want to increase their revenues, make more money, right? And literally figure out a way to move from what we call labor-based income to what we call asset-based
Yeah.
income. That's where you've probably got some active income that you're making, but then you take a little bit of portion of that and you invest it in something where that becomes a passive investment. So that's number one.
I
Number
love it.
two is a pattern where I want, to let the listener know I saw a lot of people wanting to move towards time freedom. Because once you have financial freedom, now you can buy back some of your time. You can delegate things, you can outsource things, you can hire things out. And that's exactly what I wanted to do as well. So as we start thinking about more financial freedom, number one, and more time freedom, number two, that takes us to number three, which is something Lisa and I are all about, and that is location and lifestyle freedom, right? Location and lifestyle freedom, where once you have a little bit more money and a little bit more time, you can go and explore this beautiful blue marble, right? This is a
Yeah.
big planet. And so, what we wanted to do is really live what we call the endless summer, where we set up our businesses and we set up our life and we set up our three children, where, we live in three different places throughout 4 months of the year. Right now, as we record this podcast, I'm recording it from Australia. Yes, I'm down under, right? And once we're done this, we're going to be off to North America for 3 months. And then we're going to be heading over to Europe to spend the summer. And then we'll come back to Australia. And then we'll be off to Bali. And then we'll be off to Japan. And then we'll be back to Canada. And then we're back to Australia. So, again, I don't say that to beat on our chest. I'm saying that it took a very long time to set it up, but now we've set it up and we just love having the endless summer. So, before I go to four and five, I'll let you reflect on one, two, and three.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing, and it's been something that I've been thinking about for a long time because in 2024, before I got married, me and my fiance, well, now wife, we ended up traveling Europe for 7 weeks. And the first time you go through it, you're like, I don't know how this is going to work. I'm going to try my best. We're going to see what works, and it's great. The second time through, we went this past year. We went September and October. We went on the shoulder season, and it was even easier. Like it
Yes,
literally, as you start to, and what I've realized is travel and location and lifestyle, it's all a muscle. The more you flex that muscle, the more comfortable you start to get with these things where it's like, we're doing a podcast from a hotel room. We're going to try
yep,
to bring out the ring light. We're going to do the thing. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's what it is. I'm going to try my best. That's all I can do. And what you start to realize is that you always figure it out. Like,
that's it. Well,
regardless,
it's scary at first, right?
yeah.
It's scary at first. It's messy in the middle, but by the time you're done, it's amazing. I'll give you an example of that. I've got a client in Washington, D.C. He's a cardiologist, amazing doctor, and an amazing real estate investor. But he always thought that there was no way he could literally travel to Europe for even a week because of his busy schedule. And as a coach, I challenged his beliefs, his values, and his rules. I said, what would really make it an amazing summer for you, your wife, and your two kids? And he said, well, that would be to spend a month in Tuscany.
Oh
And
yeah.
I said, okay, what's preventing you from spending a month in Tuscany? And he come up with excuse number one, two, three, four, five. And I challenge him. And I say, what if we take this excuse off the table? And how about this one? And what if we had someone cover you for this one? And to make a long story short, not only did he spend a month in Tuscany, he spent 6 weeks in Europe traveling with his wife last summer and his two young boys. They did things that were absolutely amazing in Rome, in Florence, in Milan. They went and did the canals in Venice. They made Parmesan cheese. They went to glass blowing class. They did all of these things that take people back to, the way the villages were way back when. But he came back from that and he did not miss a beat at the hospital or in, the real estate arena. And I know this summer he's planning a 2 month trip. So again, we don't say that to beat on our chest because there's a lot of people that have jobs, a lot of people that have family responsibilities, a lot of people that have kids, a lot of people with aging parents. But if you're not challenging your ability to go out there and do at least a week or two, or maybe three, that then lead to four, five, six, seven, eight. I mean, that's how we really did it. We didn't just start doing this. We started small and then really proved it out that we could do it with the kids. And now, we do it, but not only do it, we world school as well. And that's part of the lifestyle that we've got for our kids. Our youngest is 10. And so, he goes and does world schooling in Italy. We've done world schooling in Northern Europe. We've done stuff in Japan, stuff in Australia, stuff obviously in North America. But I'll tell you, he's learning a lot more about the world, by traveling it rather than sitting at a desk in a classroom.
I would completely agree. And I think it's one of the biggest things. And if you're sitting there going, how is this even possible? It's the constraints. You put
That's it.
constraints on your life and you go, how would we do this? And I bet your client probably had, I'm important, I'm needed,
Of course.
there's many other doctors, there's many other people, there's many other things. Like you have one life and it's just how do we make that life possible for us? And how do we make the
That's
most
it.
out of that time?
That's it. And we'll talk about that once we get through the five freedoms, because there's a little, support system I
Absolutely.
can give you and the listener. But to round it out, let's go through 4 and 5, Jordan, because number 4 is what we call impact freedom. Impact freedom. Because
What
once
is
you have
that?
financial freedom, time freedom, and location freedom, now you can start working on the impact projects that are on your heart. I mean, what's your mission? What's your why? What do you want to do at the dash between the year you were born and the year you're no longer here? And for a lot of people, they want to do mission work, or they want to, help a certain cause, or they want to start a foundation, or they want to do something that, really leads to their legacy. And so we
Yeah.
really believe that the more money, time, and the ability to do it anywhere you want on the planet allows you to lean into number 4 in even a greater way. And you cannot do that without number 5. And that is also what we call relationship freedom. Relationship freedom. What's that? Well, relationship freedom is where you get around other like-minded people. You leave the energy vampires, or the people that tell you it won't work, you're crazy, that's for other people, who do you think you are? And you get around people that lift you up and who you lift up, because a high tide raises all boats. And so
Yes.
when we really think about going back to the pattern recognition of what I saw my clients wanting, what I saw my wife Lisa and I wanting, it was money freedom, time freedom, location and lifestyle freedom, along with the ability to make a bigger impact and get around more like-minded people like you. So
Yeah.
how does that sound? What do you think of the 5 freedoms framework?
I absolutely love it. I think it's an incredible idea because even the relationship one, I as you were saying that, it was hitting me because the amount of people who told me, "Oh, that's crazy. Why would you do that? You don't have to do that again. Like this is," and then I do it, and they're just like, "Oh, Jordan's just on his trip. Jordan and Jordan and Madison are just doing their trip. Like it's just their thing." And because you start to get used to it. Like
Yeah,
after a year or two, people are like, "Oh, that's what Trevor does. Trevor and his family go. If you're in town, love to see you. If you're not, that's okay." And that's just kind
that's
of,
it.
and the funny thing was, as you're talking about that, as you start to get more and more ingrained in these communities, you start to talk to people, and they're like, "Yo, I haven't really had a home in like 8 years," and you're like, "What?" Like, they just
Yeah.
travel, they just do their, and it's just not right or wrong, just different lifestyle choices, different decisions, and different ways to see the world, which I think is the most interesting thing.
Well, you're spot on, and I applaud you and your wife for what you're doing. But again, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, right?
Yes.
And that's getting clear on something that we call in coaching, if you could write the story to win, what would your
Yeah.
year look like? Where would you be? Where would you go? What time would you get up? What time would you go to bed? How would you make active income? How could you make passive income? And when you start to ask a better quality question, you start to get better quality answers. And so
Yes.
that 5 freedoms framework is something I think the listener can check in with. And again, not be jealous of other people who are starting to move towards it or have it, but realize that most millionaires are multimillionaires. And I even work with billionaires. This is part of the concept of thinking that changes the way we behave, that becomes the potential for us building a tremendous and beautiful life. So, with
I
that,
love
I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. So the first step for the audience is to start to ask some of these better questions.
Yes,
And the question you said was, if you were able to write the story to win, what could this year look like? Is there any
that's
other
it.
questions you think they should be thinking about? Or you think that's a,
There's the thousands of questions. There's thousands of coaching questions and frameworks I could put people through. But the biggest one for us is really, and this is where I'll go into another tool that the listener can use, is really all built around 4 little words, Jordan, that start with the letter S, as in superhero.
yeah,
Because as they start to ask better questions, it's important for them to understand that there's 4 words that start with S, that's a framework that can help them have what we call a quantum leap forward, rather than just a slow path forward or a linear path forward. And those 4 S's are your state, your story, your standards, and your strategy. So again, your state, your story, your standards, your strategies. Let's unpack that a little bit, because your state is really what we call your focus, right?
yeah,
And you're either focused on all the reasons why you can't do something, or you're going to focus on all the reasons why you can, or at least start moving towards it. So
yeah,
ultimately, you find yourself in, getting a little bit clear on what you don't want moving forward and what you do want moving forward. And that then starts to take us to number two, which is your story. And your story is the big one because, guys, your story is your identity. It's who you
Yes.
believe you are, it's the narrative you tell yourself. And most people are telling them a story why they can't do something, right? Because of the economy, or I don't have the money, or I don't have the time, or I've got three kids, or I should just be happy that I've got a job, right? And that story is what's keeping them stuck rather than taking what we call a personal inventory of what's really true, because those might be truths, but also asking what's possible or what
Yeah.
identity would I need to step into to start to do the things that, high performers do. And that was a big one for me. So I'll back up the truck there and I'll say, what do average people do or how do they think? And what would I have to do to escape that and start thinking like a higher performer? And that's where coaching comes in, mentoring, masterminds. I mean, all of the stuff that you're in and I'm in, but that's where you start to see you through a different model of the world and through a different lens. So it
Yeah.
all starts with your state, which is your focus, your story, which is your identity. And number three is a big one as well, and that is your standards. And your standards are really the level you're going to commit to raising the bar and making things better. And for most people, they don't even think about their standards, or their standards are watching copious amounts of Netflix sitting on the couch, or their standard is eating fast food at McDonald's, where that's okay for average people. But if you want to be a high performer and move in that direction, when would now be a good time to do a personal inventory and raise the bar on what's truly important? And
Yeah.
that's where you really understand that your state, your story, and your standards precedes the fourth S, which is your strategy. And the strategy is really simply having a roadmap, a recipe, a blueprint, or a GPS that takes you from where you are to where you want to be, or at least move in that direction. But you never, ever, ever, ever want to execute on a strategy without first checking in with your state, your story, and your standards. So those are the
Yeah.
four S's that can move anybody forward. I'll throw it over to you for reflection.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think the biggest challenge for a lot of us is, and the audience that's listening, is that we don't realize that we have a state, a story, and the standards because we just live our life.
That's
And
it.
I did a presentation this morning, and we actually talked about standards. And the truth is that standards, you have them whether you like them or not. Like they're
Correct.
already ingrained with you. If that means it's we get home and we go to the gym, that's a standard. Maybe the standard is we get home and we have a huge Coke. That's the standard. It's just whatever you're used to, and whatever we leave the room very messy. We leave the room very clean. They're both standards. They're not good or bad. It's just what's the standard you want for yourself. And that's why I love the frame you said. If I was to be a high performer, what would they do in this second? How would they act in this moment? And I think that's such a powerful one because you'll start to notice the high performer doesn't sleep in. The high performer doesn't have low energy on calls. The high performer
That's right.
doesn't complain. The high performer doesn't go, but Trevor. No, they go, Trevor, let's
Well,
go. We're going to do this. Yeah.
you're spot on. And again, after doing 45,000 sessions, I've got, story after story, testimony after testimonial, that framework alone is what makes a big move for people. I'll give you another example. I've got this client in Cincinnati and his name is Joe Fairless. And Joe is a real estate investor. And when he came to me, he had 4 single family homes in Texas.
Oh,
And those
wow.
homes in the day were back, I think they were pretty cheap in a small town, worth about 60,000 bucks a piece. And every time a tenant would move out, Joe would whine and complain that he had to go paint something or refloor something or fix something. And he goes, Trevor, there's no cash flow. I can't really get ahead. And I said, Joe, it's time to change your state, your story, your standards, and your strategy. And that's when we started to think about him doing something bigger that had more meat on the bone that could really cash flow. And so he started to get into apartment syndication and
Yeah.
buying apartment buildings and fixing them up and bumping the rents and being a really, quality landlord. Well, fast forward to today, and this all happened in the last 10 years. Joe's gone from 4 single family homes in Texas to $2.7 billion in assets under management.
Wow.
2.7 billion with a B. And as we really do something called measuring backwards in coaching or looking backwards, Joe wouldn't have even got close to that had he not changed his state, his story, his standards, his strategy, and surrounded himself with the right coaches, the right mentors, the right people that allowed him to, move forward like a rocket ship. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I mean, it's brilliant because I ran through my head where I'm like, if Joe just kept doing his individual houses, keep buying the houses, he might be at 20 houses, but he's still going to
Yep.
run into the same issues that he was at. You're not at 2.7
Yep.
billion. You got to have different constraints and think about the world a little bit differently to make those big leaps and to make those
That's right.
changes. But if those ideas don't even get planted in your head, then you're not even thinking like that because you're so focused on the problem that you currently have. So it's how do you
That's
break
it.
through? How do you break through that? And I think having the coach or a different perspective or a different mindset is so powerful. So
Well, it is. And there's 5 reasons why people fail to scale. So if we really put a bow on this, let's give the listener the 5 key reasons why they're not moving forward, right?
yeah,
And that means, again, going back to those 4 S's, but also understanding number one, the number one thing that continually holds most Americans back is limiting beliefs.
yeah,
Again, it's going to take too long, or I'm not worthy of money, or I don't want to have a business partner, or whatever. So they conjure up something in their mind that holds them back. Number two is what I call a lack of a strategic plan, right? A lack of a strategic plan. Like, you got to know where you are today and you got to know where you want to go. It's kind of like going to the airport. How many times have you gone to the airport and you just go up to some plane and let the pilot randomly determine where you're going to, go? Well, we don't do that. And I think
yeah,
more people spend time managing and planning their vacation than they do their business or their life. So number one,
yes,
we got to get rid of the limiting beliefs. Number two, we got to create a strategic plan. The third reason why people fail, Jordan, is a lack of systems for support, right? And that means, who's going to help you? What is your zone of genius that you want to contribute towards it? What are you passionate about? What do you need to surround yourself with other people, right? Because even in real estate, you got to find deals, you got to underwrite deals, you got to raise capital for deals, you got to run the asset. And that's something that Joe, looking back, he didn't, do all of those things, but he had systems and people and processes. And now there's this little thing called artificial intelligence, or AI, that can do a lot of that work, but you definitely need systems for support. That takes us to number 4, which is what I just call poor time management. Because again, most people aren't really operating from a thing that I call important instead of urgent. They're doing what they call urgent and urgent and urgent, where they're making everything urgent instead of working on what's truly going to move you forward. What is the thing that if you stopped and you just started doing it 3 or 4 hours a week, that turns into 16 hours a month, right? That turns into 48 hours a quarter, where you start moving towards your ultimate goals, right?
yeah,
But you got to shift your beliefs. You got to have a plan. You've got to absolutely start creating systems to support that plan. And you got to stop lying to yourself about why you don't have enough time. And then the fifth and final one is a lack of execution, along with measuring your progress and staying accountable. Because let's be honest here, you could do all those 4 things, but if you're not out there taking what I call intelligent and inspired action, you're fooling yourself. And when you take that action, sometimes you're going to be on track and sometimes you're going to be off track. And that's why we've got to measure it and have KPIs and benchmarks. And then that final part of 5C is really, who's keeping you accountable? Who's holding your feet to the fire? And that's where having a coach like yourself or myself or a mentor or someone else can really help you to do what we call turning decades into days. People shouldn't have to figure out how they're going to do this over 10 years when you could do it in a 2 or 3 or 5 years. And so when
yeah.
we go back and we throw that back to you, the limiting beliefs, the lack of a strategic plan, the lack of systems for support, poor time management, and then not executing or measuring or being accountable are all the things that if the listener did an inventory on and started to really remedy some of those, they would start that trajectory that could take them to unlimited destinations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was literally thinking about this today because I was giving I do these 5 minute Fridays. So every
Yep.
Friday I do a 5 minute podcast where it's a little bit shorter. And I did one of them and it was on systems. And I was sitting there and I was in the studio and I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. If I didn't have the studio time designated to this, then would I be recording this? Then when I even get started, and that person inherently holds me accountable without them actually knowing it, and the girl who runs it, she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "You're holding me accountable, and I appreciate that. And my podcast will thank you for that later." Like,
I love
but
that.
you
Love it.
don't realize it. But like, even my morning wake up, I have a Muay Thai Muay Thai thing I go to, and it's at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm like, that holds me accountable. Like these are things in my life that I have constraints around me that force me. I could skip them all, yes, but I choose not to, and I want to go to them, and that helps me have a system and allows me to focus on what the most important things are. So yeah, I completely agree with that system. It makes a lot of sense. Trevor, for you, I know the world. You mentioned world schooling. That I think that they might be interested. What is that? What's going on there
Yeah,
with
well,
world
again, we've
schooling?
reached that point in the world where, you know, for the last 100 years, kids have gone to school to sit in desks and listen to grouchy teachers and have a curriculum that the government forces upon them. And that's okay. But, for high performers who really want their kids to have what we call the competitive edge in life and maybe even in business, there's something called world schooling or freedom schooling where they take the learning outside of the classroom, but into real world, life. So you learn things in the real world about math or science, or you go on field trips to, places in Europe, or you go to London, England, or we'll go to Italy, or, we've got one coming up in Japan where the kids go out there with other international kids and lots of diversity, and they literally learn in a different way through playing, through structure, through all of these different modalities. And so as we've had our youngest do more of that, we have two older boys as well, but our youngest has absolutely, started to thrive, like just absolutely soak that up, meet new friends, have international friends, write letters, just like, people did back in the day. I've got my Lisa and I have our 10-year-old writing letters and posting them to somebody in Europe. It's incredible to see the camaraderie, the likability, the playfulness, and all of the things that come from it. And I'm telling you, it's not for everybody, but if you really want your kids to have that competitive edge, you've got to really question, is the school system they're in right now the best thing for them? Or can you even start doing some world schooling part-time? Because
Yeah.
you could do it for a week, you could do it for 2 weeks, you could do it for a month. And there's cohorts all over the world, everywhere from, North America to Australia to New Zealand to Japan to Europe, that offer these for kids aged range from probably 4 up to around 15.
Oh
And
wow.
I think we'll start to see even more of that as, people really lean into perhaps a school teacher who doesn't want to be in the school system, goes to work for a freedom schooling organization or starts her own or his own.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, again, when we look at the five freedoms and the money, the time, the location and lifestyle, the impact and the relationship, there's a component that goes into all of that. But yeah, we're really big believers in world schooling or in freedom schooling. And we've got lots of our clients. My wife and I is also a coach, but even a lot of her clients and my clients who have tasted it or test drove it absolutely love it and commit to it for at least, you know, 2 months a year.
Oh, that's incredible. That's incredible. I
Yep.
love that. So we'll finish off with the five pillars. I know we didn't do it that much, but it's mental health, physical health, community service, philanthropy, spirituality, and relationships. We're going to try to finish on time. So
You bet.
mental health on a 0 to 10, how are you feeling today in this moment right now? And the reason I'm
Me-
asking, yeah, mental
yeah.
health.
Go ahead. Well, mental
Mental
health
health.
for me is really all about, identity. It's really all about, letting go of the stress, the doubt, the fear, the worry, the anxiety, and having some faith and some trust that, what got you here, you're still alive, your heart's beating, your lungs are taking in oxygen. People tend to blame and shame and get into a modality of, being a victim instead of being a victor, that we live
Yeah.
some of the best lives we can. And so for myself, I'd rate it at a solid 9. And I wouldn't give it a 10 because I don't ever think that we get up to a 10. But, I definitely have done the work as well in hiring coaches and mentors and being in masterminds and doing the work that average people aren't willing to do. So mentally, I'm feeling pretty good, Jordan.
I love that. I love that. And now physical health on a 0 to 10. How do you feel on physical health? And
Yeah,
why?
I'm in my 50s now, and I've lived on this planet for half a century. And physically, your body goes through changes through your 40s and your early 50s. But, I think it's really my commitment to feeling young, getting up early, hydrating, meditating, moving my body, where I'm at a solid 8 or 8.5.
Yeah. I know the part I loved right there is you reference the age, but at the same time you're like, I strive to be young. Like
Mhm.
the truth is here, we don't need to do these things. Like we can be young, and young is a mindset, not an age. So I
That's
think that's
it.
really important. Community
Good.
service or
Yeah.
philanthropy. How do you think about that?
Well, we do a lot of work with charities all over the world, predominantly kids' charities, because we used to do all of the ones that our parents used to do, the Heart and Stroke Foundation and the Cancer Society and all of that, which are great. And we still do give money to them. But we've really poured our philanthropy into children. And in our publishing company, we have really stumbled on something which is quite amazing, as my wife wrote a children's book called A New Alphabet for Humanity. But instead of teaching the alphabet where A is for apple and B is for boy and C is for cat, she rewrote it where A is for abundance and B
Oh,
is for
wow.
bravery and C is for compassion and D is for diversity. E is for empathy. And then there's kindness and gratitude. And we got one of the best children's illustrators in the world. And what happened is we started this beautiful, cute little, program in this book, but it went viral. And ultimately, Lisa has now sold over 100,000 copies of the book. And not
Wow.
only do, we really celebrate, her for doing that, is we're changing kids' lives all over the world. And a huge portion of what we make goes to kids' charities. We
Oh, I
donate the
love
books
that.
to children's hospitals and libraries and Montessori schools. But for anyone that's interested in checking that out, they can go to alphabetforhumanity.com and pick up an extraordinary book for kids.
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. And the other cool thing is that it's full circle. It's like one of
That's
these
right.
full circle business where you're doing both sides, which is cool.
That's right.
And then the next one's relationships. This could be your relationship with your family, your business, your clients. How do you think about relationships?
Oh, it's such a great question. And relationships to me, opens up a few different loops, right? There's our relationship with our creator, right? And whether you call that source or infinite intelligence or God, you call it whatever you want, but something gives us life. Something allows our heart to beat. Our lungs are taking in oxygen. Our hair is growing. And I really do have a great relationship with my creator. The second one to that is a relationship with myself. And I think we've got to that point where everybody is so busy running around trying to help everyone else, they forget to regulate their central nervous system or to have some sort of practice where you fill up your cup instead of running around pouring into others. So if we've got the creator, we've got myself. Next, it's Lisa. Again, you want to pour into your primary relationship with your significant other. And I know you do that with your wife.
Yeah.
Then for people with kids, that's next. And then from there, you've got clients and, apartment investors and people that you consult to and all of that. But I kind of think of relationships as the lifeblood that allows us to have an experience here on earth and
Yeah.
getting our hands around all of that. What do you think?
I love that. I love that because I mean, relationships are very complex, but the more and more we grow, ideally we're going to have more and more of them. And but it's also the depth that we can create with them. And I love how you brought up the loop around like the creator and then also ourselves. Like most people don't think about ourselves. So I think that's a really
That's it.
interesting one. I think
You
this kind
bet.
of links into spirituality on a 0 to 10, spirituality. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Well, again, I think that is a concept and a construct that a lot of people have, forgotten about, or they haven't had enough time to stay in it. But yeah, that's a solid 9. And again, I referenced it earlier that, you know, there's a universe, there's a world, there's, what scientists have cataloged is around 10 million species on this planet.
Yeah.
So when you think of all the plants and the trees and the insects and the animals and the fish, there's also this little thing called humans. And God created all of it, right? Or spirit created all of it, or infinite intelligence. Again, call it what you want. And last I checked, almost all 10 million species operate in perfect order and harmony. Right now, mushrooms are growing and carrots are growing and a monkey is eating a banana and a fish is swimming and I'm here with you. So I think that a lot of times people get caught up thinking that things are out of whack spiritually when they
Yeah.
look around at the world and look at social media, when you got to go inward and you want to
Yeah.
really really honor that opportunity to connect and have a rhythm and a daily practice that really supports it not being a when I feel like it thing, but a daily thing. And that's how we see it.
Absolutely. I love that. Trevor, we could go for so much longer. But this has been amazing. Where can people learn more about you and yeah, get involved?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. This has been one of my favorite conversations. You're phenomenal at your questions and just your ability to reflect or, take it and put your own concept around it. So first off, huge props to you
I
and
appreciate
thank you
that.
for having me on the show. And coach to coach, I've got a little gift for you and your listeners where I've prepared something for the clocked in clients and listeners where you just simply want to get this because it is so delicious and I'm offering it up to you. And it's really something called my Rich Beyond Belief mini audio series. And my Rich Beyond Belief mini audio series is 8 mini audio recordings, just like this conversation, of my best of the best of the best coaching tools and frameworks and methodologies that my high paying clients pay for. And I put it into a very short little audio program that if you go to trevormcgregor.com/clocked in, I'll say it again, trevormcgregor.com/clocked in. You can get a copy of this absolutely free of charge and delivered directly to your inbox. So that's a gift that I want to give you and anyone that really wants to soak up the Rich Beyond Belief audio series. And then for anyone that's interested in, finding out how a coaching structure works or how we might be able to do some work together, you go right back to that website, trevormcgregor.com. That's TrevorMcgregor, trevormcgregor.com. You can read through a little bit of how my coaching works. There's a ton of testimonials, and there's an opportunity to apply for a discovery call with me where we'll jump on the phone or Zoom and we'll take a look at where you're at, where you want to go, and figure out how to move you in that direction. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trevor. This was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. You betcha. And continue to do this work and continue to really ignite the passion and the possibility for everyone else that's listening.
Thank you.